I think the reality is that I think people on the left for a long time have thought like, well, we're correct, so we don't really have to do any work in making our stuff presentable because we're right. And, if you disagree, well, you're wrong and you should be chastised for it. And we're going to condescend to you. We're going to make you feel dumb. And I think that approach has just failed to serve, that the left-leaning ideology. I think the right has done a really good job at making their stuff entertaining, making it palatable, making it cool and hip. And they're really good at getting their talking points across in a way that is just so much fun to watch. And I think that people on the left have abdicated that. I'm trying to shift the focus back on that. So rather than using the excuse of like, oh, well, it's so hard to counter their stuff because, a lie gets halfway around the world before the truth's even got its pants on. Rather than having that thought process, I'm usually just thinking like, what are the snappiest, wittiest analogies? What's the quickest way I can make somebody understand a relatively complicated topic? Like, how can I get these ideas to be as digestible as possible? And then if somebody wants to fight me on the substance, well, then we can go back to my home and we can go through the studies and the data and all of that. But in the meantime, I need to make my ideas as presentable as possible so that I can persuade any random person on the street that I feel like I'm correct on an issue.
What do you think you mentioned witty, snappy, what underlies what makes you more persuasive to a person on the street? Because I feel like I have some idea, but I'm curious what you would say the most important things are. And one that you didn't say is not coming across as like other in the other tribe, which I see people do all the time. They draw the battle lines first and then they start trying to persuade. And at that point, it seems like the battle is lost.
Yeah, I think that the first thing you have to do is you have to step inside somebody's bubble and you have to acknowledge their grievance or their complaint. People have a really hard time understanding this. Like emotions might be irrational. People's thoughts might be irrational, but irrational does not mean random. Okay. Every irrational thought or feeling or emotion comes from a place, right? If you believe in a universe with guiding principles, if you believe in causality, then something that is happening is being caused by something else. It might appear random, but randomness, insofar as our emotional states, doesn't exist, right? Even a trauma response that might be irrational was caused by a traumatic event. So the first thing I try to do is like, if you feel like you hate all Hispanic people because they're taking jobs from you or whatever, right? That probably stems from some sort of economic anxiety. There's probably something there because like rich people don't feel this way, right? If you're making $250,000 a year, you're not complaining about people crossing the border, right? Unless you're too into politics. So if there's economic anxiety, I think you have to start with recognizing like, I understand why you feel this way. I understand that there are these problems and these problems are real. Now, I don't think it's for the reason that you say they are, but I understand, what those problems are. And then we can kind of talk around those problems. I think that the mistake that people run into on the left, and there's a huge disconnect, is somebody will make a statement. They'll say something like, they'll say something like Hispanics are stealing our jobs. Or actually, here I'll use a left-leaning example, so I don't come off as hyper-partisan, right? Somebody on the left will say something like, cops are indiscriminately killing black people, and then somebody on the right will go, no, they're not. The data doesn't support that. Well, the person on the left, they're not really saying cops are indiscriminately killing black people. That's what they're saying. But what's happened is they've seen enough video footage online that is incredibly troubling, and it's causing them to feel a certain type of way about the footage they've seen, right? And, even seeing two videos of, an unarmed black person being killed or whatever, the recent videos of Tyre Nichols. Tyre Nichols. Yeah, Jesus. That's pretty brutal to watch. And watching that is going to cause an emotion that's going to give you a reaction that's going to cause you to feel that way, that black people are being indiscriminately murdered by police officers. Now, that's not true at all. If you look at the data, if you ask a person, like how many unarmed black people are killed by cops a year, people will usually say, I've heard anywhere from 500 to 10,000 in some conversations. But the reality is it's very, very, very low double digits. It's like 5 to 15. It's a very, very rare event that happens, but it's caught on video and it makes people feel the way. And that's where those thoughts come from. So if you want to talk to somebody that's having those thoughts, you can't just say, well, the data. Because what that person is hearing is the thing that you're feeling is wrong. Yeah. Your feeling is incorrect, but it's not incorrect. They really do have that feeling. It's because they have seen those videos. So yeah, you always have to start from a place of like, listen, you're feeling this and I'm acknowledging that. Because at the end of the day, everybody just wants their whatever they feel to be acknowledged by another person. It's one of the best feelings ever, right? You have to acknowledge that feeling. And then once you've acknowledged that and you've kind of earned a little bit of trust and that at least you're hearing what they're saying and they feel that you're hearing what they're saying, then from there you can kind of be like, okay, well, how often do you think this actually happens? How many cops are in the United States, right? Like, do you really think that there's tons of black people being killed like every day? Wouldn't we be seeing this way more often than like one bad video every few months? If there are hundreds of thousands of cops and, millions of police interactions, you kind of work from there. That's broadly the approach that I try to take.
Sure. I mean, I love that you brought this up. I think you've hooked into something incredibly important, which is, to me, and it sounds like perhaps to you, it seems like politics is downstream from personal experience.
Unfortunately, and I hate that, but yeah, that's true. I'm like, when it comes to like politics, I'm very like autistic. Like, I like, show me like give me the data points and the like if somebody says, oh, would you rather get this car or that car? Like, you know, if as long as I don't care about the style, it's like, okay, well, let's like look at all the fucking numbers. Like that's just the mind that I have. But most people, you're very correct. It's very downstream from like, how do we feel about things? What do we see? And how does that make us feel? And what are the narratives and stories that drive us, basically? Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I mean, no. I mean, this is where my brain goes a lot, is that I feel so often I'll be in conversation, and what needs to happen is like, I mean, I don't mean this to be demeaning, but like, tell me about your dad. You know, what happened that caused this rupture with your relationship with authority? Or like, tell me about your upbringing. Like, who bullied you or beat you up, and what did they look like? Tell me about the ways that you've been told that you're not enough, and the color of the skin of the people who told you that. And when that is explored, it seems like all of the other stuff, which you mentioned, you know, cops are indiscriminately killing black people, or you could just as easily pick something that cuts in the other direction. Mm-hmm. It seems like the receptivity to doing what you discuss, which is, let's look at the data, let's take perhaps a different approach than the one that you think is most necessary, can then be received, because, as you sort of mentioned, the foundational thing that I see happening in politics is people want to be seen, understood, and heard. And they are, I think, a little bit embarrassed and ashamed to admit that their experience is as deeply personal as it is, and then they project their personal trauma onto the world and say everyone has to clean up this issue outside in the world, rather than me doing it at a very personal level. Does that match your understanding of politics?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. And even outside of politics, people in general just want to be seen, understood, heard, right? If you're on a first date with somebody, you know, figure out the best questions you can ask them to make them talk about themselves as much as possible, and then vibe off of that, and, you know, like, be reflective. Like, these are things that you'll learn on dates. These are things you'll learn from therapists, the therapists do with clients. These are things that police officers use in interrogation rooms to get subjects to open up and talk and talk and talk. These are just life skills that are applied in every area. And there's no reason why they wouldn't be applied politically as well.